Look at this, a lump of corroded bronze, about the size of a brick, green and cracked and crusted with 2,000 years of sea. If you found it on a beach, you'd step right over it. Most people did, for decades, and then someone looked closer. Inside that lump are gears, dozens of them, tiny, hand-cut bronze gears, meshed together with a precision that shouldn't exist for another 1,400 years. It's a machine, a calculator. Some people call it the first computer, and it was built before Jesus was born. I remember the first time I really understood what this thing was, and I just sat there for a while. Because the story we tell ourselves about the past, cavemen, then knights, then us, a straight, clean climb upward, that story has a hole in it. And this little brick of bronze fell right through. So let's pull it back out of the sea and figure out how something like this is even possible. The year is 1900. There's a storm. A boat full of Greek sponge divers gets blown off course and shelters near a tiny, barren island called Antikythera, a speck of rock between Crete and the mainland. When the sea finally calms, the captain sends a man down in one of those heavy copper helmet suits just to see if the waters are worth anything. He surfaces almost at once, babbling, terrified. He says there are bodies down there, a heap of rotting corpses on the seafloor. Horses, people. They weren't bodies, they were statues, bronze and marble arms and faces scattered across the sand in the dark. The divers had stumbled onto a Roman-era shipwreck, a cargo vessel that went down around 2,000 years ago, hauling Greek treasure west. What followed was one of the first serious underwater excavations in history. They brought up gorgeous statues, glassware, jewelry, the kind of thing that ends up behind glass with a spotlight on it. The dig itself was brutal. This was the very dawn of deep-sea diving, and the wreck sat deep enough to be genuinely lethal. The divers worked in those crushing copper suits right at the edge of what a human body can survive. One of them died. 2 more were left paralyzed by the bends. Men gave their lungs, and in one case, their life, to haul this cargo up. And the single object that would one day outshine every statue was the one piece almost nobody thought worth the trouble. And in among all of it was this, a shapeless green lump. Nobody cared. It sat in a crate in Athens while the beautiful things soaked up the attention. Then, months later, the lump dried out and cracked open on its own. And inside, someone saw a gear, a precision gear, in an object from the 1st century before Christ. That is not supposed to be there. So what on earth was it? Here is what it turned out to be, and being sure took most of a century. The Antikythera mechanism was a model of the cosmos you could hold in your hands. A wooden case, maybe the size of a shoebox, packed with at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. On the front, a dial carrying the zodiac and a calendar. On the back, 2 great spiral dials. You turned a little crank on the side, and the whole sky moved. Turn it, and a pointer showed you where the sun sat against the stars. Another tracked the moon, not just its position, but its phase, with a tiny rotating ball, half silver and half black, slowly turning to show the moon waxing and waning. It even followed the way the moon speeds up and slows down across its orbit, using a clever pair of gears mounted slightly off-center, one pin riding in a slot. Somebody, 2,000 years ago, worked out how to carve the moon's wobble into bronze. And it went further than that. It predicted eclipses, solar and lunar, years in advance, by writing a rhythm of 223 months that Babylonian astronomers had spotted centuries before. It showed which planets sat where. It even had a small dial counting down the years to the next Olympic Games. Those 2 big spirals on the back were not decoration. The upper one laid out a 19-year calendar, the cycle that keeps the moon and the sun in step. The very same trick we still use to work out when Easter lands each year. The lower spiral was the eclipse dial, 4 turns of little cells, each one stamped with a glyph that told you whether to expect the sun or the moon to go dark, and roughly when, down to the hour of the day. And that small games dial didn't just say Olympics. It named them one by one. Olympia, Nemea, Isthmia, the contests at Delphi, a sports calendar built into the same machine that tracked the dimming of the heavens. Stop and sit with that for a second. This is not a clock. A clock only tells you the time. This told you the state of the heavens, past or future, on any date you chose to dial in. It was a search engine for the sky, running on bronze and fingertips. And we have found exactly one of them, which raises a deeply uncomfortable question. How do you rebuild a 2,000-year-old computer out of a single cracked green brick? Slowly, and with a lot of arguments. For most of the 20th century, the mechanism was mostly a frustration. You could see a few gears on the surface, count a few teeth, and guess. And people guessed. Some called it an astrolabe. Some called it a toy. A few quietly wondered whether it was a hoax that had somehow slipped into the wreck because it simply felt too advanced to be real. And here is the cruel part. The mechanism does not survive as a neat object you can just study. It survives as 82 corroded fragments, shattered and fused together, the biggest of them no larger than your palm. Reading it is less like opening a book and more like reassembling a book that's been shredded, soaked, and then set on fire. The breakthrough was learning to see inside it without ever touching it. First came X-rays, which hinted at layers of gears hidden under the corrosion. Then, in 2005, a team led by a British researcher named Tony Freeth wheeled an 8-ton X-ray scanner into the museum in Athens. The same kind of machine a hospital uses to look inside your body, aimed instead at a lump of ancient metal. And the thing lit up from within. Suddenly, they could count every tooth on every buried gear. 30 here, 223 there. They could read inscriptions that had been hidden in the metal for 2,000 years, tiny Greek letters, a kind of user's manual engraved on the casing, describing the colors of the planets. That text had sat in the dark, unread, since before the Roman Empire. And a CT scan just opened the book. They paired those scans with a second trick, a surface imaging method that relights the metal from dozens of different angles to make the faintest scratch jump out. Between the two techniques, researchers clawed something like 3,500 characters of ancient Greek back out of the rust, letter by letter. Most of the original instruction text, a manual for a machine recovered from a corpse of bronze. By 2021, the same team published a full reconstruction of the front of the device, the part that showed all the planets wheeling around. They built working models. You can watch them spin. 120 years after a terrified diver thought he'd found a field of the dead, we finally understood what the green brick actually did. And that is exactly when the real chill sets in. Because knowing what it is only makes the next question worse. Here is the part I genuinely cannot get over. Nothing else like this exists. Not from that century, not from the one after, not for more than 1,000 years. The Antikythera mechanism uses gear trains, gears driving gears driving gears, with teeth cut to a fraction of a millimeter to do real mechanical calculation. The next time anything in the entire surviving record comes close to that level of geared complexity is in medieval Europe with the great astronomical clocks of the 1300s. That is a gap of roughly 14 centuries, and we know those clocks. We know them by name and by maker. Richard of Wallingford's monumental clock at St. Albans Abbey, Giovanni de Dondi's astrarium, finished around 1364 after 16 years of work. They were famous in their own time, praised, written about, copied. They left a trail. The Antikythera mechanism left nothing of the kind. It appears in the historical record, fully formed, exactly once, and on either side of it, for centuries, there is just silence. Think about what that actually means. Lay the timeline out on a wall, and this device sticks out like a smartphone in a Roman villa. By any honest reading, it is out of place in history. So how? There are really only two ways to explain it, and both of them are unsettling. Maybe it was a one-off, A single towering genius, a Greek Leonardo, who built this and a handful of cousins to it, and then died, and took the whole craft into the grave with him, knowledge that lived in one workshop and ended with one funeral. Or, and this is the version that keeps me up at night, maybe it wasn't unique at all. Maybe machines like this were being made for generations, by an entire tradition of craftsmen we have utterly lost, and we only hold this one because, by sheer luck, a single ship sank in exactly the right place, and the sea kept it safe. If that's true, the strange thing isn't that the Greeks built a computer. The strange thing is that we found even one. We may not be looking at the peak of ancient technology. We might be looking at the only surviving scrap of it. And that reframes everything. We like to picture knowledge as something that only ever piles up, that once humanity learns a thing, we keep it, we build on it, we climb. But this green brick is hard proof that knowledge can also simply vanish. A skill this advanced existed, and then the workshops shut, the masters died, the wars rolled through, the libraries burned, and the entire art of mechanical computation fell out of human hands for over 1,000 years. It wasn't erased in one dramatic blaze. It rotted quietly. A ship went down. A craft was forgotten. The empires that came afterward simply never knew it had been done at all. There is something almost unbearable in that. Sometime in the 1st century BC, a person sat at a bench and cut bronze teeth by hand, carrying in their head a working model of the entire moving cosmos. And nearly all of it, the names, the workshops, the other machines, is just gone. We are left with a brick. If that feeling grabs you, that strange mix of awe and quiet dread when the past turns out to be bigger and stranger than you were promised, then this is exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe and stick around, because the museums of the world are full of these green bricks, and we are only just learning how to look at them. Now, let me take you back to that lump of bronze one last time, because there's something about it I still haven't told you. Remember how it sat in a crate, ignored, while everyone crowded around the beautiful statues? That is the part that should stay with you. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't sealed in some secret vault. It was right there, in a museum, in plain sight for years. And the single most extraordinary object on that entire shipwreck looked like a piece of garbage. We very nearly threw away the first computer because it wasn't pretty, and I can't stop wondering how often that is still happening. How many drawers in how many museums hold some cracked, unremarkable little thing that nobody has scanned yet? How many answers are sitting on a seafloor right now, quietly turning green, just waiting for someone to look closer? We tell ourselves we understand the past, that we've got it mapped. Cavemen, knights, us. But the Antikythera mechanism punches a clean hole straight through that story. It is a reminder that the people who came before us were not simpler than us. They were just further away. And sometimes the only thing standing between us and a forgotten genius is whether someone is willing to pick up the ugly green lump and turn it over in the light.